What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my must-add waiver wire targets heading into week 3 of the NFL season. And through 2 weeks, the waiver wire has not been super hot. I guess maybe that's kind of a positive because it means there hasn't been a ton of injuries, but there are certainly still some players that are worth an add. Going to be talking about players at every single position. If you enjoy the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. These are all going to be players that are rostered in 35% or fewer leagues using the ESPN waiver wire. And we are going to kick it off with Wan'Dale Robinson, rostered in just under 30% of leagues. And he is just coming off a nuclear week 2, 10 targets, 8 receptions for 142 yards and a touchdown. He also had a pretty solid week 1, 8 targets, 6 receptions for 55 yards. So it's not like Wan'Dale Robinson completely came out of nowhere. He was a big factor in the Giants' passing attack last year, averaged 8 targets per game. The volume was really, really strong. The issue was just that he was super inefficient on those opportunities, only had a 3.1 ADOT, and his only utility for fantasy was as like a kind of PPR scammy flex wide receiver if you were really desperate. And so even if he came into this season commanding volume, it's still not like he was a super intriguing fantasy option, but I think this game kind of showed a newfound weekly upside for Wan'Dale, where this was not a spot where maybe he, ripped off a few screens, got kind of fortunate to have a few big plays. Of his 142 receiving yards, you can see here on the next gen stats chart, only 34 of those were after the catch. So he was consistently winning downfield, putting together those big plays. And so I'm not going to say that Wan'Dale is an amazing, every week start, but he is someone who's proven that he can, command consistent volume over an entire season. And if he can now win down the field and have some of these higher upside performances, he is someone that could become more of a consistent start in your fantasy lineup. Now, once again, I'm not going to plug him in as like a top 24 wide receiver heading into week 2, but this was a really fun game. Wanted to give him his flowers. Like I said, like 8 targets per game in 2024 is not nothing. And so if he can add some efficiency, definitely someone who I think is worth an add. Another player who I think is worth an add is Troy Franklin, who is only rostered in 2% of leagues, and pretty much out of nowhere, not necessarily out of nowhere, but breaks out in week 2, leads the Broncos in snaps, routes, and targets. He has an 88% route participation. He was targeted 9 times, caught 8 of them for 89 yards and a touchdown. And, kind of contrary to Wan'Dale Robinson, where Wan'Dale's actually winning down the field, Troy Franklin, someone who's viewed as more of like, a downfield deep threat, he's actually getting schemed up with a lot of these gimme opportunities for the Broncos. And I think that's a positive. Like, for a lot of these fantasy wide receivers, it's tough to bank on like that 140, 50-yard touchdown reception to be playable for fantasy. For a guy like Troy Franklin, if you do have that deep touchdown upside, but you're also getting force-fed underneath, that's kind of the dream scenario here. So 51 of his 89 receiving yards came after the catch. And he really was the focal point of the passing attack. Like I said, they were giving him these opportunities. Courtland Sutton pretty much did nothing in this game. And Troy Franklin was a prospect that I really liked coming out of college. Slipped in the draft, thought he was a steal for the Broncos. Wasn't really a factor last season, but he was getting a lot of steam throughout training camp, was viewed as a potential year 2 breakout candidate. And it seems like that might be starting on this Broncos passing attack. I want pieces of it. Troy Franklin, a very strong add heading into week 3. Then we're going to talk about my guy Harold Fannin Jr. again, rostered in 27.7% of leagues. And this is back-to-back weeks where he has just straight up outproduced David Njoku, despite, having less snaps and running less routes. In week 1, he had a 67% route participation, was targeted 9 times, caught 7 of them for 63 yards, also added a carry for 3 yards. Week 2, 65% route participation, 5 targets, 5 receptions for 48 yards. The Browns are 0-2. I think Njoku heading into a contract year, he's always live to be a trade piece, potentially get moved. And we didn't see like a huge usage shift after week 1, but like Harold Fannin Jr. is here to stay. The dude is legit. I would not be shocked if we started to see that usage increase. And then obviously he could just have his ceiling skyrocket if David Njoku were to ever get moved. So if you need like a weekly starting tight end, I honestly think he's fine in that role. But I also think he does have a lot more upside with a potential David Njoku trade. Now we're going to get back on the wide receivers. Another guy that I talked about last week, Elic Ayomanor rostered in 7.8% of leagues. I talked about him last week as a guy who was running starting wide receiver routes, didn't have a great week one, but the fact that like a day three rookie was getting those opportunities, that was pretty significant. This was back-to-back games where he was leading the team in routes, second in routes behind Calvin Ridley, and he actually converted on those opportunities. That usage in week two, he was targeted 6 times, 4 receptions for 56 yards and a touchdown. Shout out to Cam Ward for that touchdown. An insane play. The dude like scrambles all the way to the right, completely goes against a lot of the rules you learn at quarterback, but he throws across his body to like the left third of the field and ends up, completing that touchdown to Elic Ayomanor. But the fact that he's already, starting to log some productive games, or at least one productive game, that's definitely interesting. We want to buy into these young players when they start to break out. You have to assume this Titans offense with Cam Ward is just going to get progressively better throughout the season. So Ayomanor, certainly an interesting add off of waivers. Then someone who had a much larger week one, Kayshon Boutte, rostered in 26.4% of leagues. Now, week one, like I said, monster performance, 8 targets, 6 receptions for 103 receiving yards. Week two kind of came back down to earth, only 1 target. It was a great catch, 16-yard touchdown reception. The reason why I still have him here is that he's like the clear leader in routes for this team. He had a 74% route participation in week two. The next highest was Stefon Diggs, all the way down at 58%. So they're kind of running a committee here at wide receiver. He's still a young player, but I do think it's like important to point out that like he is the one guy where they're like consistently, we want him on the field, getting these opportunities. Now it's possible he's never able to like consistently command the volume that you need, but he really started to break out in the last 3 games of last season, had a strong week one, made a big play in week two. Obviously not someone you want to start in your lineup heading into week 3, but especially in deeper leagues, I do think he should be on a roster. Then we're kind of getting into the grosser options, then also some quarterbacks that I think could be potential streaming options. I have Kareem Hunt here. He's rostered in like just under a quarter of leagues, and he has not been fantasy relevant through 2 weeks. This Chiefs offense, the Chiefs run game has kind of been gross. But his usage is very, very similar to Isaiah Pacheco, where through 2 weeks, Kareem Hunt has 17 opportunities. Isaiah Pacheco has 20. Both have been bad. Neither have been playable. But if they do start to figure out this run game, maybe get into some better matchups, Kareem Hunt is someone who could emerge as like a desperate start. And like people who drafted Isaiah Pacheco, they're not just straight up dropping him. And so if someone's getting somewhat similar usage, I do think they're at least worth a potential add. But this really just does go to show like how weak the running back position is on waivers through 2 weeks. Then I will talk about a couple of quarterbacks. We had Joe Burrow, Justin Fields go down. Fields, hopefully short term. Joe Burrow, like this is potentially a season-ending injury with his turf toe. So some people out there might need, some new quarterback options. I'll go with Daniel Jones here, rostered in 21.2% of leagues. Admittedly, I was very skeptical after week one. Not saying it was like a fluke performance, but like we can see these teams go out, have a big week one. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to carry over for the entire season, and it still doesn't. But he followed up a strong week one with a very nice week two, 29.5 and 22.8 points through 2 weeks. They put up 33 points against the Dolphins. All right, it's the Dolphins. They go out week two, drop 29 against the very, very tough Denver Broncos defense. They have not punted yet through 2 weeks. And so I'm still not going to say I'm fully bought in on Daniel Jones, but as a fantasy option, he has some rushing upside. This offense is humming. He's a very, very solid replacement for Joe Burrow or Justin Fields. And then I'll also shout out Matthew Stafford here. He's rostered in 33.5% of leagues. He's been fine to start off the season, like 15.5 points per game through 2 weeks. Doesn't necessarily have like an amazing upcoming schedule, but at some point, if your quarterback goes down, if the waiver wire's kind of dry, you might just want to find someone who you know is a good quarterback with some solid weapons, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, and then just kind of hope for the best there. I did want to give an honorable mention to Jake Browning. He was super productive in 2023 in his 7 starts, averaged 21.8 points per game. The problem is just that his upcoming schedule is so tough. He has the Vikings, Broncos, Lions, and the Packers. And so, yeah, maybe he'll be better in the second half of the season, but like, that is a really tough stretch if you do want him starting in your lineup right now. Then we'll move into some running backs, kind of like these handcuff guys. I'll mention Tyler Allgeier. Actually had pretty strong usage in week 2. Still more of a handcuff, but maybe in like super favorable matchups, you could try to bank on him to have like 50 rushing yards and a touchdown. We have Kyle Monangai rostered in 2.2% of leagues. He did see an uptick in his usage, 7 carries, 2 targets, took 38% of the running back opportunities. At this point, he is the clear running back 2. Roschon Johnson, 0 offensive snaps. Still a handcuff at this point, but if the Bears offense starts to figure it out, he is someone who could potentially have some value. Then we have Blake Corum rostered in 5.3% of leagues. The Rams do an interesting thing where they kind of just give running backs drives. So Blake Corum took the 3rd, 7th, and 10th drives in this offense. He had 5 carries for 44 yards and a touchdown. Worst case scenario, he is an elite handcuff. Then we're going to wrap this video up with Jalen Coker, someone who I just think is a really solid IR stash if you don't actually have to like burn a roster spot on him. He's rostered in 8.4% of leagues. Dealing with a quad injury, he's going to miss the first like 4 to 6 weeks of the season. But this is a guy who had earned the starting slot role in this Panthers offense to the point where Hunter Renfrow, who is now running like top 2 routes on this team, was cut. Like they were totally content to roll with Jalen Coker. You look at this wide receiver room, Tetairoa McMillan has been awesome through 2 weeks. Love the guy. But the rest of their wide receiver room, like Xavier Legette, he's just not it. He is not a good football player. Hunter Renfrow had a nice game, 90% route participation, 9 targets, 7 receptions for 48 yards and 2 touchdowns. But that is the role that could be going to Jalen Coker and the role that the Panthers deemed heading into week 1. Like they wanted Coker in that spot over Hunter Renfrow. So when he comes back, I do think he's someone who could be interesting. He was an undrafted rookie last year, started to show some flashes in this wide open wide receiver room, outside of Tet. I do think if you can just get him for free, right? Like I'm not saying you use a roster spot, you stash him on the IR, just kind of wait and see what you have there. But that is going to wrap it up for my top waiver wire targets. If you guys enjoyed, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. Questions, comments, feel free to drop them down below. Thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.